All right, you and I are diving into a story about a prince shot by his own brother. The arrow puts him in a coma. The reason, he's the son of the king's first wife, a queen who died from a mysterious poison, and the killer was never even found. After taking that hit, he was comatose for 6 years, while his soul was sent somewhere else. To the place where legendary heroes go after death, a realm only for world changers. At first, the other heroes there thought it was incredible that he had made it. How could such a young kid become a hero? But they soon learned he was nothing like that. He was weak, talentless, and definitely no hero from his era. Still, they couldn't accept someone like him in their realm, so they decided to train him. For 1,000 years, until he was just as worthy as every other legend there. After a millennium, his body finally woke from the coma, and those heroes who had treated him. But get this, the very heroes who treated him like trash actually wished him luck as he left. He just smiled and stepped into the light, knowing they'll never see him again. Because he isn't a hero, and he has zero plans of becoming one, back in his world, he opens his eyes. His body feels weak, with barely any strength to get up. He is Davy Alon, the eldest son of a small kingdom, and the ones who killed his mother and tried to kill him. They had better get ready, because he's not that weak and innocent kid anymore. Day after day, a single maid was the only person who came to his room to care for him. She was the reason he held on. He kept his awakening a secret, only moving when she was gone. He went straight to a calendar, needing to know how long he'd been unconscious. When he saw the date, the truth hit him like a second arrow to the back. He'd been asleep for 6 years, the same amount of time since that bastard shot him. And now it's time to pay. To take back his family, he needs a stronger body. He tries using the magic he learned in the other world, but nothing happens. He can't understand why. Back in the land of heroes, a legendary figure taught him everything. A true saintess, known for centuries for her God-given powers, was his personal tutor. She was the one who taught him magic, but it wasn't working, and he felt like all his training was about to vanish, having zero effect back here on Earth. Now just when you think he's done for after hours of failing, it finally works. The divine healing power activates. A green light completely takes over the room. And in that glow, his weak and miserable body, which felt ancient, like a 300-year-old man's, was suddenly bursting with raw energy. Seeing the kingdom where he grew up, he stretched his arms in joy and shouted to the sky. Unfortunately, he didn't notice that the maid had walked back into the room right behind him. She cried tears of joy, seeing her young master finally awake, a short time later. The castle doctor examined him and confirmed his health was incredibly better than before. A complete and unexplainable miracle. During the checkup, a woman entered the room. This is Linus Beret, the woman who poisoned his mother and took her place as queen. And with her are her sons, the second prince, Carlos, and the third prince, Benedict. That's right, Prince Carlos, the one who tried to eliminate him and thought he'd succeeded. The woman asks if he saw his attacker's face, and you and I both know this is a test. He says yes, adding that an assassination attempt on royalty is the highest crime. The highest crime possible. Hearing those words, the real culprit's blood ran cold. But beside him, his mother just laughs, saying the case was closed years ago. The doctor, sensing the insane tension, says Davy will be completely fine. He's all healed up in just a few days. The woman, Lioness, doesn't even try to hide her true feelings. Trust me, you can feel the poison when she says he should have just died. So he asks if him being alive really bothers her that much. Carlos adds that it's a total shame for the kingdom to have a prince get attacked and then sleep in a coma for all those years. He flat out says a pathetic prince can't ever become king. And with that, they all just walk out. Now that he's alone, our main character realizes something. He was using magic right in front of them. But somehow nobody noticed a thing. He figures the power gap is so huge, he's practically invisible. I know what you're thinking, seeing that wicked queen and her sons again. Yeah, our boy wants revenge right now, but somehow he manages to keep his cool. He figures it's because he spent all that time in a temple, but that thirst for vengeance is still there. For now, he just needs to calmly figure out his next move. First things first. Though he's starving and wonders what his first post-coma meal is going to be. 15 days later, he's recovered his sacred power. Got a haircut and has been training non-stop in his room. He realizes time crawls when there's nothing else to do. But thanks to the grind, his mana control has gotten way better and his recovery process is speeding up. Even though he could heal fast with his magic, he's also got a necromancer's knowledge of the human body, plus the medical skills taught by his master Heya. So fully restoring his body is going to be no problem. The protagonist puts everything he learned during his isolation into practice and finds that magic makes things way more convenient. Still, there's one tiny problem. His maid. Amy is strictly following the doctor's orders and is only serving the prince soup every single day. He feels like an old man who can't chew his own food. Amy feels bad, he hates it, but says she can't do anything about it. Regardless, our protagonist insists that one bowl isn't going to be enough, so he tells her to serve 5 more just like it. The maid is completely startled by the request, but Davy promises he'll eat everything as long as she brings it. Davy knows that for a normal person, this would be an insane amount, but because of the restoration magic he's using, his body needs way more fuel. In a way, after a proper meal, he feels like his soul is finally at peace. However, while he was eating a lot of food, his trips to the bathroom were also frequent. A little later, Davy finds some documents and discovers something that changes everything. Amy expresses her apologies for this, but Davy comforts her, saying it wasn't her fault. He realizes the huge amount of food he's eating is becoming a problem for the family's finances. Not only that, but he discovers Amy is the only servant left in the entire castle. The family's money problems had even impacted this. What's more, the castle he lived in was enormous for just one person to manage all by herself. Worried about the future, Davy asks what the castle's estimated assets are. Amy replies that they only have 6,000 gold coins. Davy figures if they can manage that budget, they shouldn't have any more problems. However, Amy states that officially they are supposed to get 500 gold a month, but in reality, you and I know that's not what's happening. Less than 100, Davy immediately asks if his family is being extorted. The maid says no, so he asks if it's about her salary, realizing by now she probably wasn't getting paid at all. Amy can't lie to the boy. She admits she's only receiving a third of what she used to earn. Hearing this, Davy thinks Amy must be too generous for her own good. But agreeing to work under these conditions, that was just plain foolish. After all, maids were seen as property of the nobility. Amy was an artist's daughter. But because of their terrible circumstances, she became his personal maid. Still, looking after the prince and the castle alone for 6 years had to be hell. And on top of that, she spent the little she earned just to keep caring for him. That's it, Davy orders her to take everything she's owed from his personal funds. But Amy refuses. She tells him they don't even have food for tomorrow. There's no way she could accept that much money right now. Davy tells her that from now on, she doesn't need to treat him like a prince. He says he feels much better and doesn't need her constant care anymore. Besides, being called prince feels too formal, creating a distance between them. And he hates that because she's the only person who's genuinely stayed by his side. All right, stick with me, because this is where the real confrontation begins. A counselor from the kingdom's financial department pays our main character a visit. The man says it's impossible for the prince to use the funds already accounted for. But Davy can only focus on the man's incredibly strange-looking mustache. He sees the people around him staring with total disdain, and even the counselor notices. Instead of backing down, Davy tells the man not to get in his way. He states he should be receiving around 500 gold from the kingdom. But he's getting less than half of that, and he demands to know why. The counselor explains that castle maintenance costs get deducted from the total. So the prince's family only receives whatever tiny amount is left over. You and I both know that's a lie. Davy's getting sick of the excuses. And the people around them feel the exact same way, pointing out the obvious. The family's castle has cracked floors and a garden completely choked with weeds. A place that rundown shouldn't cost so much to supposedly maintain. Not only that, but he knows it's rare for any prince or royal family member to have to manage their own finances like this. It's just not done. In response, the counselor states that the fund isn't supervised by his department. He says his job is managing the budget, not handing out personal loans. Davy gets it. No one is willing to take the blame for the corruption. He prepares to leave until the counselor asks if the prince is planning to go. To the maintenance department, Davy just scoffs. What's the point? He knows he wouldn't get any real answers there either, just more excuses. People in charge always blame someone else instead of giving a straight answer. Before walking away, he tells the counselor to enjoy the money he has stashed. As he walks the halls, Davy realizes something. It's no wonder that no servant besides Amy has stuck around. It wasn't just the money. They were mistreated by the nobles, leaving the entire burden to fall on Amy. He then turns and asks if Amy could bring him a sword. She's completely stunned. It's a weird request, but he swears he has no intention of using the sword to hurt a soul. Hearing this, Amy goes to fetch a sword for the prince. But as she leaves, Davy thinks to himself that he won't be cutting a person. Because in his mind, his targets can't even be considered human. Our hero knows his position is shaky, and he can't just start taking out targets without a solid plan. He's already an outcast, after all. If he's discovered, things could get even worse for him. Besides, he has no intention of stooping to the level of the nobles he despises. Later, Davy and his maid find a dead wild boar. He claims he just found it. But of course, that's a total lie. He hunted it himself and is getting it ready for a meal. Saying this, Amy gets completely flustered, saying that a prince's hands should never touch a dead animal like this. She even tells him to be careful not to get hurt again. Davy just says it's fine as long as no one else sees him. He knows they wouldn't even let him see the king if he tried. As for the others, there's nothing he can do about them for now. Davy is fully aware the queen is doing everything she can to get rid of him. But as a student of Hercules himself, he knows a thing or two about survival. So Davy tells Amy that this wild boar is dinner, and it's no danger to him. Now let's cut over to the queen's chambers, because this is where it gets juicy. She tells a maid that the more she thinks about Davy, the less he seems like himself. Her maid, Shirley, says that according to the doctors, the prince can barely walk. It'll take over a year before he's even close to a full recovery. But the queen isn't buying it. She asks if there's any chance that info is wrong. She sneers that even though Shirley is an A-class informant for the Black Moon, in her presence, she's nothing more than a C-class maid. Okay, hold on, the Black Moon, that's the Assassin's Guild in the capital of Round. The queen says even if she trusts her, she can't relax with the prince awake. She knows even the king abandoned him, and he's still weak from the coma. But she won't feel truly safe until he is completely and permanently removed from her path. But despite her royal status, Shirley has a warning. Her guild members act independently of social class. If the queen keeps insulting them, she'll have problems with the entire guild. Startled, the queen backpedals, saying she was just thinking out loud. But she still threatens Shirley, saying she better be ready to stop the prince's plans. If not, it'll be Shirley who pays the ultimate price. With that, she's dismissed. Alone, the queen thinks it's better to get rid of disobedient dogs first, before she makes her next move, and she absolutely cannot wait for that day. A flashback shows our hero learning to control his mana. It's like pulling a thread through hundreds of tiny needles, slow and careful. His master warned him that the hardest part is reaching the veins in the brain. He was told to never forget these lessons unless he wanted to go blind. But looking back, when he first saw his masters, he had his doubts. The priestess Roas just looked like a drunk who could split the ocean with a few words. And you and I are about to find out the other was a necromancer who acted more. We're jumping right into a memory of a master who acted more like a priestess than Roas herself. But even as a great mage, all she ever seemed to flash was her enormous staff. The goddess Hippocra, also known as Sister Hia, once told him that during this experiment, she would give it her all to complete the task. She said people didn't seek her out just to watch, but to actually learn from her. So she told Davy to try a little harder, insisting that if he trusted his masters more, he could evolve his powers to a whole new level. However, the moment he did, he was put through an experiment so horrible, he swore he'd never go through it again. Back in the present, Amy finds him just outside the palace. She asks why the prince is wandering the gardens again. He just says the weather is lovely and the garden looks elegant today. Then he tells Amy she can go back to her duties, just to let him know if anyone asks for him. Davy thinks to himself that normally, Amy would lose her mind seeing him do anything risky. But it seems she's finally getting used to his new routine. Although she does still refuse to sit and eat a meal with him. He wonders if his efforts to get closer are finally paying off. Anyway, he finds a good spot. Right in the middle of the garden, it's discreet and calm, perfect for what he has in mind. And now pay attention, because this is where his real work begins. He enters a state of meditation. He concentrates, pulling in all the surrounding mana. Davy knows that as long as the air is pure, it's not just oxygen nourishing his lungs, he's also absorbing raw mana from nature itself. This ancient technique, it said, was made by Odin and then passed down through generations of other gods. But here's the catch. Despite how effective it is, there's a hard limit to the mana a user can store. To increase that limit, you need intense training and management. But with this method, mana that would normally take months of work to collect can be gathered in just a few days, making it an insanely broken technique. Our hero knows that if anyone else discovered this, it would spark a revolution across the entire country. But he has absolutely no intention of sharing it. After all, it's not a skill just anyone can perform during his meditation. He feels it, someone is watching him, and I know what you're thinking, who could it be? But the second they realize they've been spotted, they bolt. Davy figures it's been a while since anyone has watched him that intently. But looking into it now would just cause problems, so he decides to let it go. For now, he needs to maintain this image of a fragile and useless prince. It's the only way he can train his mana in peace. Still, he has another issue to deal with. The mana circle. Davy knows that priests cannot wield magic. And mages can't use sacred powers. On top of that, necromancy is a power neither of them can ever use. However, he's a special case. You and I both know he can wield the powers of priests, mages, and necromancers. All thanks to those crazy masters from the temple and 2 eccentric researchers. Just remembering that time is enough to make our hero feel sick. Anyway, he refocuses. Mages typically form a circle in their heart to channel mana, unfortunately. That method could never handle the clash between necromancy and sacred power. If he even tried, his heart would probably be shredded in the process. It's called the artery circle. This method involves combining the arteries around. Alright, here's the crazy plan. Use his own body to create an impenetrable, mana-proof circle. To do it, Davy has to use everything, even his own heart. And get this, it won't just stop the clash between necromancy and sacred power. It'll bring about some seriously unexpected results. But this is basically body modification. Even one tiny mistake means instant death. That's why he's been avoiding it. The last time he pulled this off, he only survived thanks to his masters. But now he's totally alone, and there are no guarantees he'll make it out alive. As he hesitates, our main character sees a vision, a powerful memory. He sees his masters again. And he thinks even if this whole thing fails, it can't be any worse than being trapped in that temple for 1,000 years. So with that, he decides to go for it. Later, Amy starts to worry about the prince. It's way past dinner time and he's a no-show. She finds it really strange. He is never, ever late for a meal. She was ordered not to disturb him unless it was a major emergency. But still, she's got a bad feeling. And if something happened to him on her watch, she would be the one held responsible. But just then, our protagonist appears. He apologizes for keeping her waiting, admiring her patience. But then he just collapses right onto her, leaving Amy completely flustered. And yeah, I know what you're thinking. She totally believes this is a romantic move. But nope, he was just leaning on her out of pure, crippling exhaustion. He can't even stand, and then he slumps to the floor, leaving Amy terrified. She has no clue what's wrong with him. Sometime later, our protagonist wakes up. He's in his bed, realizing he passed out the second he laid eyes on Amy. He then notices his friend is right there, passed out at his bedside. Looks like he's caused her a whole lot of trouble all over again. Anyway, here's the payoff we were waiting for. The circle formation process was a complete success. All three powers are now coursing through his veins, and this new strange circle. It comes with another very special effect, and that's not all. Davy feels it. A much stronger mana presence in the air around him. Now that he's stronger, he can absorb way more of it from the atmosphere. He feels that with just a flick of his fingers, he can cast any simple spell, even restoration magic. 5 months fly by. Amy is helping our hero with some ingredients, but Davy says he's been fine. Ever since that artery circle was finished and his body stabilized. Someone has been secretly leaving meat and vegetables inside his castle. At first, he thought it had to be some kind of trap from the queen. But he knows there's no way she could pull this off so perfectly every time. Davy senses that someone is genuinely trying to help him out. He just hasn't figured out who it is yet, even though he can feel a presence. He spread his mana all over the castle trying to find this person, but so far, he has no answers. Still, it has helped the protagonist sharpen his senses. He can now easily tell who's getting closer or moving away. Then Amy speaks up. She says they won't have to worry about food, but Davy warns her they will have guests very soon. Trust me, you're going to want to see who's coming. He guesses it's probably one of the queen's informants. Back in his room, our protagonist receives his visitors. A priest starts to analyze his condition. Let's dive in. The priest asks if the prince thinks he'll be walking again soon. He claims that since the prince was bedridden so long, his holy power is too dangerous to use for healing. But our main character knows every single word the cleric is spouting is complete nonsense. The guy hasn't even tried a proper healing spell. He has zero intention of actually helping. Davy knows this priest represents the highest religious authority in the nation, so for him to just ignore that duty to follow someone else's orders. It's pathetic. He tells the priest to save his breath. He can see right through him, but here's the thing very few people know. Davy is already almost completely healed. He then points out the silver weapon Priya gave the priest, saying it should be more than enough to fix these minor injuries. The priest gets defensive, calling the prince a layman who has no idea what he's talking about. He claims the use of holy power is granted only to priests and that the prince shouldn't be as selfish as the infamous Prince Carlos. Hearing this, Amy steps in, scolding Father Boris for his disrespect. He does not appreciate being told off by a mere maid. Furious, he slaps the young woman hard across the face, and here's where my blood started to boil. But Davy has to keep up his act. He can't intervene yet. Boris tries to justify it, claiming that if maids aren't kept in their place, it reflects badly on the prince. He says it's a shame he had to go that far, adding with a smirk that the maid has a beautiful smile. That was the last straw. Davy almost leaps from his bed. Anyway, Boris says he's leaving and tells the maid to see him to the door. With that, he announces he'll be back in 15 days for another examination. Davy tells Amy to walk him out. She absolutely hates the idea, but has no choice but to obey her prince. As soon as they're outside the room, Boris tries to set up a private meeting with Amy, telling her to come alone at night. He says the prince's life is in her hands, blackmailing her into it. But let's be real, Boris couldn't care less about some maid or a sick prince. In his mind, he'll have his fun with the girl and then toss her aside like she's nothing. Back in his room, the prince is filled with pure rage. He stands up. He didn't forge his legend in the temple, just to stand by and watch trash like this run wild. Okay, I know what you've been waiting for. He remembers Lady Daphne always telling him he'd be an animal without self-control. But in this moment, he sees things a little differently. The priest's guards are absolutely terrified when they see the prince walking toward them. Davy thinks to himself that a little rage can be a powerful guide. And if laziness is the key to progress, then pure anger is his fundamental strength. A moment later, the priest's lackeys are the first to taste his steel. Meanwhile, the priest is still trying to threaten Amy. He's working on the queen's orders, so he's not afraid of some weak prince, and definitely not his maid. Not only that, Boris claims everyone in the kingdom feels the exact same way. He can do whatever he wants to them without any punishment because he's got the queen's protection. Hearing this, Davy just starts to laugh. He says he was looking for a good excuse to act and just found the perfect one. He levels his sword at the priest and asks Amy, what's the punishment for blasphemy against a royal? Annoyed and shocked, the priest can only ask, how? Standing, Davy reminds Boris there's a good reason he never got promoted. Let's be real, his so-called sacred magic was never actually needed for anything. Our guy then turns to Amy, reminding her he only asks his questions once. He doesn't like repeating himself, so Amy lays out the law. The penalty for insulting royalty, immediate execution, no trial. And just like that, Davy carries out the sentence on Boris himself. With his final breath, the priest warns that the queen will make him pay. Davy just thanks the phony priest, adding that anyone who sided with him is about to suffer the exact same fate. Simple as that. He wastes no time tracking down the queen. The second she sees him, she explodes. She calls him crazy for killing the priest, a disciple of the Holy Order. But Davy calmly justifies it. Boris threatened his life, so he acted according to the law. And now, watch this, the queen is about to attack. But he stops her, saying the kingdom's laws weren't this twisted before his coma. And what's more, while all this drama unfolds, the king himself does absolutely nothing. Davy says he sees no reason to be punished. After all, he just dealt with someone who committed blasphemy against the royal family. Unless, of course, a prince's status now ranks below a cheap disciple. The provocations hit their mark. The queen is furious, but she hesitates. Still, she snaps back, saying the prince has absolutely no proof of his claims. And even if he did, foolishly provoking the Holy Order is a death sentence. Then she says she always knew Davy had inherited his mother's stupidity, launching into a tirade of insults. Okay, I think we all know she just crossed a major line here. Davy's face goes cold. He tells her it's not polite to insult the dead. He draws his sword, ready to threaten the queen directly. But then her royal guards appear out of nowhere, surrounding her in an instant. And right there, our main character finally understands her confidence. She's always got a shield to hide behind. He says this could be interesting, but he'll save the real fun for another time. Still, he leaves her with a warning. Every word she speaks is just another nail in her coffin. And trying to kill another royal, yeah, that's the biggest nail of all. Her face drops. The queen realizes in an instant that Davy knows. He knows it was her son, Carlos, who tried to assassinate him. Our guy thinks to himself that holding onto a trump card for too long. That's just not his style. He then casually mentions the time she slapped him while he was in a coma, proving just how little class she has. He tells her to act like a lady, because looking at her trashed chambers, the place is anything but elegant. And since she scared away all her staff, she can be the one to clean up this entire mess. Personally, and trust me, you and I are about to witness the ultimate power move. He tells her to get it done quickly, or a very nasty rumor might just start to spread. From now on, she'd better watch her every move. The moment he leaves, the queen completely loses it. All her rage explodes. She unleashes it all on her servants, screaming at the top of her lungs. Let's be clear, she absolutely wrecked her room. Now that she knows the prince's true intentions, her desire to get rid of him has grown even stronger. But first, she wants him to suffer before he leaves this world, and soon enough, the rumors started to spread. Some people believe the prince killed the priest because he'd gone completely insane after waking up from his coma. However, this was all part of our hero's plan. Once the queen found out what he did, so did everyone else. But they didn't get the full story. All they knew was that the prince had killed the priest. And since half the palace staff was on the queen's side, Davy's reputation plummeted even further into the ground. But not all the news was bad. Amy appeared before the prince, telling him that more supplies had been left for him, even though Davy already said he didn't need any more medicinal herbs. But Amy suggested that someone out there must know about his good heart and was simply trying to reward him for it. So Davy asks if Amy thinks he's a good person. The girl doesn't hesitate for a second and says yes. Despite seeing the prince execute someone right in front of her, Amy hadn't changed her opinion of him one bit. Davy just thought to himself that she was a truly incredible person. In the middle of their conversation, someone else showed up. It was Besius, the Grand Chamberlain. He told the prince he had brought the sinners here at the queen's command. Besius explained that every single one of them had been stealing palace money, and a few even tried to escape before they were captured. The prince then asked what the normal punishment for that kind of crime was. The chamberlain replied that usually, the punishment would be death for the sinners and their entire families. However, it was the prince himself who would decide their fate. Davy mentioned that rumors of him being a bloodthirsty monster had started to circulate recently. Now pay attention, because he then asked if he should just act the part. The sinners begged, pleading with him to spare their lives. In response, the prince ordered that the standard punishment be applied to every single one of them. But first, he wanted them locked up with no food or water for 9 days straight. And even though this was the queen's order, Davy, who secretly hated it, planned to turn this whole situation to his own advantage. A little while later, the prince ordered new servants to be hired, but that Amy would be kept on as his personal assistant with a salary increase. He also asked if a meeting with his father would finally be permitted. Besius said no, so the prince asked if his father denied it or if it was the queen, his wife. The chamberlain couldn't answer, saying he was just a messenger. You and I both know what that means. He also asked the prince to be patient, claiming his request would eventually be granted. Davy simply said he would keep that in mind. The chamberlain then got ready to leave, but before he left, our hero mentioned he had eaten all the food he'd been given. So the chamberlain didn't need to send him any more medicinal herbs. But Besius played dumb, claiming to have no idea what the prince was on about. He suggested maybe the prince was just being blessed because of his good nature. Then he added that someone else was waiting outside to see him, so he wouldn't disturb him any further. And even though Besius denied having anything to do with the supplies, our protagonist was 100% certain it was him bringing the food and medicinal herbs. After all, Besius was the head of the king's staff and had known him his entire life. He just hadn't realized that besides Amy, he had another secret ally. Anyway, Davy had to focus on the visitors who were about to arrive. A moment later, Amy appears, announcing the fourth prince and second princess have arrived. And just like that, the princess barrels in. Let's meet Winley Alran, and you can tell she's absolutely overjoyed to see her brother again. In fact, she's so happy she practically tackles him, sending him crashing straight to the floor as Amy freaks out behind them. But then her brother appears, telling Winley she needs to be more careful. This is Barris Alron, the fourth prince and Winley's twin brother, who adds that he's also glad to see Davy looking so healthy. The current king, Creonis Alron, has children with 3 different women, the current queen, his first mistress Anisha, and his second mistress Alice. While Alice fully supports the queen, Anisha chose to stay neutral, making her an outsider in the palace. Barris and Winley are Anisha's children, which makes them our protagonists' half-siblings. While Barris is formal and polite, his sister is a lot more reckless. Winley tells her brother to drop the formal act all the time, reminding him he was the one whining about wanting to see Davy in the first place. As they bicker, Amy tries to check if the prince is all right. Our protagonist, meanwhile, remembers hearing a rumor that the twins were leading a band of thieves. Seeing their less-than-royal behavior, he thinks it might be true. I mean, you and I can see it too. Still, they are his siblings, and they seem to listen to whatever he says. And in his current situation, that's a connection he can't possibly ignore. After they finally sit down, they realize it's been 6 years since they last met. The twins were sent away to a remote area right after Davy fell into a coma. They were only 8 years old back then and could only obey the orders they were given. On top of that, their mother sent her eldest daughter, Dana, to a foreign land, all thanks to the current queen's scheming. Anisha couldn't control her other 2 kids. And though others don't know it, everything the king's mistresses do is secretly supervised by the queen. Okay, let's get back to their conversation. The twins mention they've already seen their father. Davy asks how the king is doing. Barris replies that despite his fatigue, their father is well. But then Winley realizes her brother Davy hasn't even had the chance to meet his own father, and she is completely shocked by this revelation. Anyway, Barris mentions that on his way over, he noticed the palace was not in great condition. Davy explains that some people had been pocketing his money. But he's already taken care of it, and things will soon be back to normal. Still, Barris insists this is unacceptable. While his brother was in a coma, people decided to rob him blind, so he's planning to ask the king to take action. However, our protagonist tells him not to, claiming everything is already taken care of. He'll handle it himself, not wanting to bother the king with such trivial matters. Noticing the growing number of people willing to help him, the protagonist wonders if this is all actually happening or if it's just his imagination. Pushing that aside, he's surprised to learn Winley has a talent for magic and asks if they are really part of some artistic group. Winley explains her twin would get hurt if it weren't for her, since he's always running around wildly with 0 coordination. She says people like him aren't even qualified to fence. Trust me, we all know this reunion is just getting started. Competition, that one word grates on Barris, and once again, the twins start bickering right in front of their brother. After they finally cool down, Winley hands our protagonist a letter. And you're going to want to pay attention, because this changes everything. A massive fencing tournament, held only once every 5 years, is about to begin. This time, the whole thing will take place in the realm of Pisti. As he reads, Davy realizes the sheer scale of this competition. Bice figures this is the perfect chance for Davy to finally leave the realm, since he's lived his entire life here. He even claims he asked their father, but Wla immediately corrects him, saying she was the one who made the request. And Davy was personally authorized by the king to go. Besides, she adds, the realm of Pisti is the legendary city of water. It's supposed to be beautiful there. So she declares she's going with him, and she is not taking no for an answer. With that, our hero says he can't refuse a request from his siblings. He'll travel with them. Davy thinks that, he's never actually been to a foreign realm, and it might not be so bad to enjoy an event like this. What's more, he figures a little fun will do him some good, and he actually starts getting excited. Meanwhile, you and I are going to check in on the royal hall. Bisius remarks that Barris is about to turn 14, practically an adult. He adds that the princes are probably discussing the tournament as we speak. But he tells the king not to worry, as the young master has really matured. Bisu's praises Davy's incredible calmness and sharp perception, expressing genuine shock at how much the prince has grown. Hearing this, the king simply says it's sad that even his chamberlain is aware of it. Back with Davy, he stares at a portrait of his mother, lost in admiration. Not just for her, but also because his room was finally cleaned up and no longer looks like some haunted mansion. With Bess's help, the new staff worked fast, and the palace now has the grand appearance it deserves. It wasn't just Davy, but Amy, too, was completely charmed by the new decor. She found it so satisfying that things were finally getting back on track. However, Davy wouldn't be staying long to enjoy his new room because he had to travel. Amy confirmed she had already packed everything the prince requested. He leaves a bottle in her care, then joins the twins to head for the kingdom of Pisti. Now, this continental fencing tournament has always been a huge event, drawing everyone's attention and holding enormous influence. With Buraseb participating, Davy was allowed to go with them, hoping his brother would win and in turn shake up Carlos's position of power. For some reason, Davy still doesn't know why the queen ever agreed to let Buraseb join the competition in the first place. Maybe she doesn't actually believe he can win, or maybe she's planning something sinister. And trust me, Davy's going to have to keep a very close eye on her. Before they set off, the king appears in public to bless their journey. The moment he's seen, the crowd erupts in cheers. For them, Crionessa Alran was the ruler they all loved. But for Davy, he just saw the man who was supposed to be his father. This was the first time he'd seen him since waking from his coma. For the past 6 months, the king had actively avoided his own son. The king then asks if Bice is feeling confident. The boy says yes, proudly declaring he'll represent the kingdom well with his skills. In return, the king wishes Buraseb a safe trip home. Instead of after talking with the others, the king simply turns his back on him. You and I can already feel the tension in this royal family. But before leaving, he tells Davy it's good to see him looking healthy. Winley asks if her brother's okay, and in his head, Davy just thinks yes. He's not about to waste his emotions on the king. Just then, a messenger appears. The king has an announcement. Because Prince Barris is participating in the tournament, it's such a big deal that they're lifting the curfew for the entire event. Davy can only think about how different the king seems now. There's no trace left of that heroic, confident man he used to be. Now he just looks like a scruffy old man, totally exhausted by everything. In any case, the main group finally sets off for the tournament. During the trip, Barris notices his brother seems bored and asks him about it. Davy just says no, he's just not used to traveling so far. Winley, however, has an idea to liven things up. She pulls out the wine Davy brought, thinking it might make the trip more fun. She says it's the first time she's ever smelled such a fragrant wine. When she asks where he got it, Davy explains something incredible. The wine was left by his mother, for a reason he still doesn't understand. Hearing this, Barris immediately asks if they should really drink something so valuable. But Davy just says this is the perfect moment for it. After all, they're here to celebrate. Winley notes how much he's changed. She says he used to never let go of anything his mother left behind. But Davy just says wine is meant to be drunk, not stored forever. So he proposes a toast to their happiness. Later on, they set up camp on the road. Barris figures they'll travel again in the morning, since they still have a day to go. It feels peaceful, but trust me, this is the calm before the storm. He mentions he managed to get Winley settled for now, and that the wine definitely helped. Barris remembers Davy used to say he wanted to go camping someday, and points out that this is exactly what they're doing right now. He also says he tried to make their official departure as quick as possible, figuring a long ceremony would just be draining for his brother. Davy thinks to himself that this trip would be way faster on horseback. Traveling this slow is really starting to test his patience. It makes him think about all the things that have changed, and if there's more he missed. With that, Barris heads off to bed. Amy then approaches the prince. She asks if he also wants to get some rest, but Davy says the moon is different tonight. Not just more beautiful, he can feel that the magic in the air is stronger too. And he plans on making the most of it. During the night, someone strikes up a conversation. He mentions the red moon is named Cyrus, and the blue one is called Cruz. He says Cyrus is the one that makes the beginning shine, and Cruz illuminates the end. Our protagonist is impressed, saying the man knows quite a lot. The man just says it's common knowledge that even a kid would know. He also adds he'd rather be having this chat with a woman. And that's when a colleague walks up and asks who he's talking to. The man is startled. He thought he was already talking with his colleague. Which begs the question, was he talking to a ghost? And let me tell you, that's where this story gets really creepy. He just laughs, realizing he was the very ghost they were talking about. See, Davy had used his powers to become invisible and had been spying on the guards. He clocked that 4 of them were elite expert swordsmen, so for now, he's not worried. He figures if anything major goes down, they should be able to handle it. You know, like getting ambushed in the middle of the night by about 20 enemies. And right on cue, he spots ninjas from afar, figuring they had waited. They probably held off until everyone was asleep before launching their attack. This has the Queen's plan written all over it. After all, you and I know this is the perfect way to get rid of Davy. And the others all at once. Our boy doesn't want to expose himself, not yet. He has to avoid raising suspicion, but at the same time, he can't just ignore this. Besides, most people who witness his true power don't live to talk about it. Even without a real weapon, he gets ready to throw down. He remembers his old master's teaching that anything you can grab can be used as a weapon. According to Davy, there are no rules in a real battle. Weapons are just an extension. An extension of your body, and with a little creativity, even a piece of cloth can become a one-of-a-kind sword, so armed with a stick, he dives into action. And get this, he just scoffs at his opponents, seeing how incompetent they really are. So just out of pure curiosity, our main character asks if the Queen sent them. But he gets total silence in return, not a single one of them talks to him. In that case, Davy tells them if they're not going to answer, they can just walk away. But he knows the Queen's hounds would never give up, so he attacks again. While fighting, he's wondering what the Queen really gains from all this. Taking out 3 royals would throw the whole kingdom into chaos. Even Linus would face major problems because of it, or perhaps she has another motive. Back to the fight, our boy takes down a few enemies with no trouble at all. He then asks if the others are even going to try and escape. He also tells them he'll give them one chance to run and deliver a message to the Queen. Tell her Prince Davy is going to destroy everything she has, just for fun. Seeing how powerful he is, the enemies finally decide to retreat. But he's not about to let them get away so easily. He chases after the ninjas, calling them slow. And not only that, he uses the chance to eliminate them, saying it's not so simple. To escape his grasp, after finishing off the ninjas, our protagonist once again mocks their pathetic performance. He notes that a ninja's greatest virtue is patience, a famous saying they should have known by now. Just then, more ninjas emerge from hiding, but for our guy, this is useless. He claims their little tactic won't work on him. He can already sense it. One of the ninjas is trying to escape, while the others stayed behind to buy some time. After wiping out the stragglers, Davy comments that they were so pathetic. They weren't even worth the effort. Besides, he had this all planned out. He prepared for this before the ninjas even showed up on the scene. He declares that unless they're on the other side of the continent, no ninja can escape him. At this, we're about to see him launch an attack at the ninja who fled, and he connects. He hits him with a magic technique that has absolutely no shape, no scent or color. But the moment it makes contact, it instantly erases the target's very soul. Even our protagonist admits that was a little brutal, but his masters taught him well. Stick with me here, because our main character lives by two simple, brutal rules. First, always finish what you start. Second, show zero mercy to anyone who threatens your life. So for these enemies, a perfect, clean elimination was the only fitting end. Best of all, no witnesses, meaning nobody could ever trace this back to him. Not a single shred of proof. Sometime later, the Queen receives news of the failure. Shirley reports that all the life-linked candles she had lit for her agents were out. Every single one of them had been extinguished. At this, the Queen understood. Her entire squad had been annihilated, but she demanded to know what happened to the targets. Shirley could only reply that they had probably just arrived in the Palisti kingdom. The Queen is absolutely furious. I mean, can you blame her? She wants to know how Shirley failed to take care of just 3 children and 5 knights. She declares the Dark Moon Guild is nowhere near as strong as they claim to be. Not only had they failed, they also lost 20 of their own members in the process. Shirley insists they're still investigating, but all signs point to Prince Davy having an accomplice. The Queen just scoffs. Who in their right mind would help that brat? She orders Shirley to find out more, declaring she will show this mystery person exactly what happens when someone dares to cross her. She then reminds her servant that the only reason she agreed to work with Shirley's guild in the first place was because they gave her their word they would never fail. Therefore, if a mistake like this happens again, their contract will be cancelled, and she'll make sure to use her power as queen to dismantle their guild once and for all. Back with our heroes, Winley spots the Palisti kingdom up ahead and alerts her brothers. Davy is pleased they've finally arrived. He knows the Water Kingdom is a pretty small city-state. However, its historical buildings and ancient ruins are among the most beautiful on the entire continent. And yeah, you can see why. Our protagonist just soaks in the view. Judging by his expression, his brother can tell he's happy. Davy confirms it, saying that this, after all, is where the sword fighting competitions take place. They have a massive stadium that's used as a battle arena. The place is incredibly popular, drawing fighters and even monsters to battle for their lives. Winley mentions that in this year's edition, 8 participants are set to represent their respective countries. The protagonist quickly realizes what this is. In the end, it's nothing more than a battle of national pride. Plus, only people under 20 years old are allowed to join, making it a competition for rising stars, not established masters. And get this, Winley adds that the Round Kingdom actually sent an idiot to represent them. At this, his brother asks if she shouldn't try motivating him instead of just insulting him. Davy, on the other hand, knows Barissa's skills are at an intermediate level, ranked just below a master swordsman, which is seriously impressive for his age. But then Winley reveals that the representative from the Fallen Kingdom is none other than the famous Sword Princess. You heard that right. And trust me, a lot has changed during his coma. He knows that Alina of Fallen is the only princess of the entire Fallen Kingdom, as the other 9 are all princes, but she was always the crown prince's favorite. Barissa mentions that despite Alina's fame, it's not just her skills that made her famous, because she also possesses the divine sword. Winley explains that this legendary sword is called Trust Me. You and I are about to see a legendary blade, Caldera's, a masterpiece that took 1,000 days to forge. Davy realized it had been a while since he'd heard that name. Hares, the sword god, had been his actual teacher back at the temple. The guy was lazy, sure, but his skills were on another level, and he always boasted about his sword. He was known for leaving his mark wherever he went. But still, the feeling was a little strange for Davy. Just then, a young woman passes by, and something about her catches his eye. When he asks why she stopped, she just brushes it off as nothing important. Later, Davy's discussing the sword with his siblings, recalling the legend that it has a spirit, said to be born from the Creator's pure love for the world. This blade wasn't called divine for nothing, which made him wonder why it chose Alina as its new wielder after hundreds of years. Now that's the big question, right? Barisset adds there was another reason Alina was so famous. He claims she's one of the continent's 5 immeasurable beauties. Davy, however, wasn't buying that as the real reason the sword chose her. After dinner, he throws on an outfit prepared by Amy, then asks if she has anything a little more simple. But the maid just replies that this is the simplest outfit she could find. Even if he wasn't joining the competition, he was still a prince. He had to look the part. The night of the festival finally arrives, and the twins are all ready. Davy compliments his sister on her looks, but Barisset tells him not to overdo it, or Winley might actually start to believe him. That little jab earns him a stomp on the foot. And Winley pulls our hero onto the dance floor, inviting him for a dance. At that same ball, another princess gets asked to dance. But she's clearly uncomfortable with all the noise. Her companion suggests that this event is for the younger generation to meet, and that she should try to enjoy herself. He then asks how her visit to the village went earlier. The princess just replies that it wasn't bad for such a barbaric place. Ouch. Before the competition, a banquet and a ball were set up for the nobles to mingle, but our protagonist. Nope, you and I know he's only there to size up the other guests. He notices most of them are young, since the competition was restricted to people under 20. Still, there were other chaperones there, just like him. By far, Barisset was the most popular guy in the room. Without even trying, he became the center of attention for a whole crowd of girls. Davy figures his brother's natural charm must be the reason he's so popular. Still, he found it pretty interesting that Barisset was actually interacting with people. And it wasn't just him, Winley was also getting a lot of attention. Davy, however, wanted to keep his distance to analyze his potential opponents. In the middle of it all, Barisset tries to signal for help. But when he looks for his siblings, they've already hit the dance floor and left him to the wolves. Davy just hopes his brother enjoys his youth and doesn't do anything to mess things up. Winley then says she never imagined Davy would be dancing with her one day. She also realizes that, without knowing it, she had just taken her first step into high society. Still, she was a little upset, claiming that if it weren't for Davy's unique situation, he could have been in the competition too. After all, he was a genius with a sword, and that thought right there, it just hits different, doesn't it? All right, let's jump right in. Our boy tells his sister she's exaggerating, saying that even with some skill, he could never reach an expert's level. However, Wle fires back that talent is nothing but an illusion. If someone doesn't put in the work, their talent is completely worthless. Even so, Davy says he doesn't really care about all that. He's not after attention, he just wants a peaceful life. Hearing this, his sister says he sounds just like an old man. But right in the middle of their chat, someone appears, saying this is the most fitting place to reunite with Princess Wle. Immediately, our protagonist stares the guy down, wondering who he is. More importantly, he wants to know how this dude even knows Wle. And Wle herself does not look the least bit comfortable with this sudden appearance. But watch this, the man shoves our protagonist away from his sister and asks Wle if she would grant him the great honor of a private conversation. Wle, however, calls him Prince Valentian and states she's in the middle of a conversation with her brother, so she can't give him any attention right now. Valentian, clearly annoyed at being rejected, formally introduces himself as Valentian Dubultus, 7th Prince of the Boltus Kingdom. The protagonist does the same, simply introducing himself as Davy Owl. With that, Valentian starts a conversation, but our hero quickly says he's only there to accompany his siblings. Valentian basically wishes him a nice time in the background. He then turns his attention back to Princess Wle, saying he would very much like to win this competition in honor of her beauty. Then asks her to pay close attention to the arena during his matches. Wle, however, says he's being rude to the other contestants, acting like he's already won before even competing. But Valentian smugly claims it's not rude if you're only speaking the truth. Annoyed, the princess says her own twin brother will be participating in the competition. and his arrogant words only prove how much he is underestimating his opponents. She then leaves the prince standing there and walks off with Davy. Seeing his sister's fiery attitude, Davy realizes she can definitely defend herself. Still, he knows damn well an arrogant prince like that won't let things end there. And just as we thought, Valentian gets up and tries to grab Wlay's arm. Seeing this, our protagonist decides he's been patient enough with this rude individual. He instantly unbalances the prince and disarms him completely, leaving him totally shocked and defenseless. Next, Davy warns Valentian he should never touch his sister like that again. He also adds that Valentian is lucky he didn't break any of his bones, so he'll still be able to compete without any problems. Of course, this only makes Valentian even more furious. He rips off one of his gloves and throws it right in our hero's face. With that, he's challenged him to a duel. Wlay speaks up, saying the prince is way out of line. But Valentian insists, claiming he's doing this for his honor as a knight. Just then, another person speaks up, saying Valentian is causing way too much of a scene for someone who claims to have honor. It was the princess from before. She says she's been watching the whole situation and asks if he really thinks he can get back something he never even had. As soon as our hero sees the princess, he finds her very familiar and is completely stunned. And you and I just realized it's Harris, the god of swords. Let me tell you about Harris, the legendary hero who founded the mighty fallen empire. An empire that grew to become one of the continent's 3 great powers. Now Harris was the first wielder of the holy sword calderas and the founder of the lost claymore sword technique. It said a master of this swordsmanship could create a tsunami with just one swing. But our hero finds that a little hard to believe. Back in the present, he realizes something strange. The princess looks exactly like Harris. This is Princess Ilana of the Fallen Empire, known as the Emperor's Treasure. Still, Davy can't shake the feeling that she looks way too much like the sword hero, but Harris was a guy. A handsome one for sure, but there's no way he just decided to become a woman. But just as he's thinking this, the princess walks right up to him. She asks him what he just said. Davy immediately apologizes, saying he was just thinking out loud and must have been mistaken, desperately trying to get her to drop it. The princess then turns and starts scolding Valentian. Our hero thinks that Ilana has an absolutely stunning presence. But yeah, the same can't be said for Valentian. Davy just sees an ugly, arrogant prince with zero charm whatsoever. Ilana tells Valentian that if he truly calls himself an honorable knight, then he should apologize to the people he just insulted. But one look at the prince's face tells you he has zero intention of doing that. Our hero figures a guy this proud was never going to apologize anyway. So he accepts the duel, and this is where things really start to heat up. Ilana asks if he's actually serious, calling this a totally meaningless fight. She says Davy has no reason to accept, but he says the decision is his alone. And if Valentian hasn't backed out yet, then he accepts the challenge. Right here, right now. A moment later, Davy grabs a wooden sword and thinks it's been a while since he held one of these. Bice runs over, telling him that even if he's strong, his opponent is a real tournament fighter. Davy knows this. Seeing his worried siblings, he tries to calm them down. His opponent, of course, uses this as a chance to taunt him. He says if he's just going to flail around like an amateur, he might as well give up now and stop scaring his family. He even says that if Davy admits he lost and gets on his knees to beg, he might think about forgiving him. Barris, absolutely furious, tries to step in, but Davy stops him. Actions speak louder than words. In that case, Valentian declares he's not going to lose. In fact, he's so sure of it, he says if Davy somehow wins this impossible fight, he will be the one to kneel and admit Davy is superior. Our hero agrees, but warns him not to back out when he inevitably loses. Now let's think about this a second. Davy has to plan his approach carefully. After all, everyone here thinks he's just a weak prince who barely recovered from a coma. So he can't go all out and reveal his true power in a simple skirmish. And so the fight begins. Valentian just smirks, thinking our boy is scared. He totally expected Davy to make the first move, not just stand there. Hearing that gives our protagonist an idea. He explodes forward, charging at full speed. Valentian is completely shocked by the sudden attack. But instead of attacking him, Davy intentionally smashes the ground. He pretends to let his sword just slip from his hands, and where does it end up? Right in his opponent's face. While Valentian eats a solid hit, Davy acts like it was a total accident, that his weapon just slipped. But listen, this was all part of his master plan. He just took his opponent down without revealing a shred of his true strength. Not only that, but Valentian feels completely humiliated because the blow that dropped him was apparently just a clumsy mistake. And what's worse, the crowd totally buys it, openly commenting on how shameful his defeat was. Furious, Valentian scrambles up from the ground, wanting to end his opponent right here and now. But Davy just scoffs, saying for that, he'll need to train a whole lot better, because those weak skills won't finish anyone. So Valentian attacks our protagonist, trying his absolute hardest to land a hit. But he can't even get close. Meanwhile, Davy, he isn't even breaking a sweat. Realizing he's on the verge of total defeat, Valentian falls into despair, wondering why the gap between them is so huge. In the middle of another frustrated swing, he's struck down again as the crowd watches him fall. On top of losing, he has to endure the taunts not just from our protagonist, but from every single person who just saw him lose for the second time. Annoyed, he screams at everyone to shut up, declaring he can't stand to hear any more of their nonsense. Meanwhile, Davy noted that his opponent was more than just defeated. He had been publicly humiliated by the very same prince everyone had written off as weak. Now, our protagonist knew his fencing was superior, all thanks to his mastery of the drunken stance. Okay, I know what you're thinking. And yes, it's exactly what it sounds like, deceiving the opponent by acting like a total drunk who has no idea what he's doing. This technique was created by Doc Godge Jun, the biggest drunkard in the pantheon of heroes, who was obsessed with making the most wicked and wretched sword style imaginable. Our hero knew this because he actually met the man himself during his time at the temple. Jun used to brag about creating the technique all the time. But he also knew how malicious the style really was. Davy had always heard that a technique like this should only be used against someone who truly, absolutely deserved it. So from the start, he knew even its creators considered it a taboo art. Not because the technique was too strong, but because of how deeply it could manipulate and deceive an opponent's mind. And trust me, you'll see why. This style wasn't made for self-defense or offense, but to utterly humiliate someone in front of a massive crowd. It targets an enemy's openings while they're attacking, setting them up for a fatal blow, making it brutally effective. The opponent becomes like a mouse lost in a never-ending maze. And the more people watching, the worse it gets for the target. Which is exactly what's happening right now. After toying with his opponent for so long, Davy wonders if he's just that good or if Valentian is just that terrible. He has to admit, though using this style is immensely satisfying, feeling like it was practically made for him. Davy believed this style was perfect for anyone who wanted to have a little fun during a fight. But unlike him, his opponent wasn't having any fun at all. Furious, Valentian unleashes his powers. Bontes declared it was supposed to be just a friendly training match. He asked if Valentian had completely lost his mind using his real powers. But our main character had already backed his opponent into a corner. Davy knew that if he managed to get out of this attack unscathed, he couldn't just use luck as an excuse. Plus, he'd felt eyes on him the whole time. He'd been watched since the duel began. Valentian, for his part, seized the opening. He charges fiercely at our protagonist, but just as he's about to strike. Now pay attention, because Davy sidesteps the attack like it's nothing, again. Not only does he shock his opponent, he completely turns the tables. He unbalances Valentian, sending the so-called prodigy straight to the ground. In that moment, the arrogant prince felt Davy's true superiority. But our hero immediately tried to downplay it for the crowd, acting like an amateur. He pretended he just tripped and by sheer luck disarmed the prince. The crowd only felt contempt for Prince Valentian, and Davy's victory was sealed. The duel left everyone with questions. Was Valentian always this pathetic? And was Prince Davy really the same person who just woke up from a coma? And yeah, I know what you're thinking. Davy's excuse is just hilarious. He claimed he could barely hold his sword right, which is why he was unbalanced. But luck was on his side. Hearing this, Winley remarked that her brother used up all his luck today. But what was a great show for some was a complete waste of time for Leanna. She found the whole display incredibly stupid, so she just turned and left. Davy noticed this and could only conclude that the princess was a cold one. Sometime later, Davy gets an earful from his brothers. They tell him he wasn't just irresponsible, he caused a huge commotion. Davy defends himself, saying everything turned out fine in the end. So there's no need to stress about it, but Bontes argues that Davy was just lucky. His opponent has an explosive temper, and it could have easily ended in death. He then mentions that the twins had actually run into Valentian before. They witnessed his skills with their own eyes, and right after that, Valentian had started going after Winley, while they agree that he probably won't try anything with her again, Bontes warns Davy. He tells him not to pull a stunt like that again, because luck isn't always on your side. In response, Davy just takes his brother's hand and gives it a squeeze. After showing that flash of strength, he tells Bontes to stop treating him like a sick patient. But he promises to take his advice and stay out of trouble from now on. Davy figured that sooner or later, his brothers would find out his true strength. So he thought it was probably better not to hide it from them anymore. Winley, for her part, just felt relieved knowing Davy was strong enough to protect himself. Besides, he caught his opponent completely off guard, while Valentian was off balance. Even Davy himself was a little surprised by his opponent's humiliating defeat. Speaking of him, Valentian was still absolutely furious, losing his mind. He was smashing objects in his chambers to vent his rage while his servants panicked. Valentian screamed that he was the next prince of the Baldi's era. And you and I both know he would not tolerate being shamed in front of the other nobles. After all, he had to project an image of a radiant and exceptional figure. All right, you and I are about to meet a prince who thought he owned the world. Basically, anything he wanted, he got, so Valentian set his sights on Princess Winley, deciding she would be his future wife for a simple reason. Beyond her beauty, she also had an expert swordsman for a brother. A pretty good one, too, and this marriage would make him Valentian's man. On top of all that, he had already arranged everything with Queen Round. His whole plan was mapped out, making him absolutely certain of success. But now a roadblock had appeared in his path, and his reputation was completely in the gutter, so Valentian's fury was more intense than ever. He starts destroying everything in sight, filled with an overwhelming desire to eliminate Davy for humiliating him, but as he voices this thought, a voice asks if this is what he truly desires. Now pay close attention. Startled, he demands to know who is speaking. A woman appears before him. She tells the prince she can help him get exactly what he wants. Still confused, he asks who she is. The woman introduces herself as Shario. She tells him to remember that name, then steps closer to the prince. She says to trust her, because only then can he achieve his revenge. Some time passes, and the day of the tournament finally arrives. Amy informs Davy that his brother is about to enter the arena. He seems excited, but not for the fight. He just says he has a long way to go. Davy claims he was just thinking out loud, adding that it was time to leave. Other things could wait. Meanwhile, Benitez was already in position. Winley watches from the stands, and she wasn't alone. The entire arena was buzzing. Everyone awaited the fight, but Benitez's opponent was none other than Valentian. And after what happened last time, trust me, he has no intention of losing again. Our protagonist finally arrives, thinking as he sees the excited crowd that the energy in this place was absolutely incredible. He was glad his brother's match was in the afternoon because he also felt pretty unwell. When he meets Winley, she asks if he is feeling okay. Davy prefers to keep his condition to himself, thinking about the cause. He completed his mana circle at a very young age, which gave him the power to defeat opponents who were much stronger, but his transformation wasn't finished. Sometimes, after overusing his powers, he would get some serious indigestion. He figures if this keeps up, he'll have to use his sacred powers for a stomach ache. Shortly after, Benitez enters the arena to a massive roar from the crowd. Our protagonist is surprised at just how popular his brother is. He hadn't known who his brother's opponent was until he saw Valentian enter. He found it deeply ironic that the same guy would face two key figures from Ran. Besides, he figured a showdown like this would have taken much longer to happen. Before the match begins, the judge makes an announcement for the rules. The blades are blunted, and using mana on the swords to injure an opponent is forbidden. Staring at his brother, Davy remarks on how crazy the crowd's reaction is. Winley is worried sick about her twin, thinking he might get hurt if he gets reckless. However, the protagonist just reassures her, and trust me, his next words are pure confidence. He says Benitez is no rookie, so he has nothing to fear for his safety. Thinking nothing could possibly go wrong. Back at the arena, the judge calls the competitors forward as mages conjure a magic barrier around the dueling stage. Valentian, silent until now, looks completely locked in. And he's not the only one. Benitez is taking this deadly seriously. With that, the judge signals the start, and both fighters charge head-on. Based on his own duel with the guy, our protagonist knows Valentian's sword style is totally unpredictable. Benitez, on the other hand, relies on pure strength to overwhelm his opponents. Comparing their styles, his brother should have the clear advantage. Besides, our main character figures there's no way Valentian can withstand Benitez's heavy-handed attacks. But then the exact opposite happens. Valentian doesn't even dodge. He blocks the attack straight on, completely defying everyone's expectations. Seeing this, the crowd realizes this fight is gonna be way more interesting than they thought. Our protagonist, though, notes that Valentian didn't fight like this during their match. Improving this much overnight is basically impossible. Even a genius needs time to master new physical skills. Still, he's confident that if Benitez keeps up the pressure, his opponent will eventually hit his limits and just burn out. But even as he tries to analyze the situation, our hero can't shake the feeling that something is very wrong. Winley feels it too, saying she's never seen her brother move so fast. She thinks that if he's improved this much, she'll have to step up her own training. Davy also sees his brother's massive improvement. Ever since he was a kid, Benitez dreamed of becoming a knight. After 6 long years, his brother's hard work is finally paying off. After all, he poured his entire life into it, but his opponent, he's a total unknown, and now, watching Valentian fight so differently, Davy thinks it's like he's facing a completely different person. He's felt this weird sensation before, that gut feeling that something dangerous is about to happen. Noticing his unease, Winley asks her brother if he's okay. Back in the fight, Benitez analyzes his opponent. He never expected Valentian to actually counter his longsword technique. He has to admit the guy is persistent. But despite his strange moves, Benitez knows he can't let his guard down. Instead of waiting for an attack, he decides to end this right now. So he prepares his single strongest blow. But as he unleashes it, Valentian just stands there, perfectly still, letting the sword get dangerously close to his face. Benitez has no idea why his opponent would do this. But still, he diverts his own attack at the very last second. After all, he can't actually injure the guy, or he'll get in trouble with the organizers. With that, he tries to attack again, but this time making sure not to hurt him. Big mistake. It was all a part of Valentian's strategy. Before Benitez can strike, he channels pure mana into his own sword. And yeah, I know what you're thinking. That's completely against the rules, and it puts Benitez in mortal danger. The night before, Benitez had been training nonstop, determined not to lose. That's when Davy showed up to talk to him, joking that he couldn't sleep because of all the noise. Davy mentions that their sister is already passed out and asks why Benitez isn't doing the same. His brother just says he's too keyed up to sleep, which led him to Benitez admits he's feeling a little shaky about the upcoming fight. But despite his nerves, he's still sure he'll win. Davy just hypes his brother up. He tells him there's no way he'll lose and not to worry about a thing. Looking at Benitez's mana, Davy sees it structured, gentle, and smooth. He even thinks about giving his brother a little secret power-up. Sure, it'd be a massive scandal if anyone found out, but Davy is all in. So he tells Benitez to pause for a second, saying he looks a little tense. He offers a quick shoulder massage, but this is no ordinary massage. As he works, Davy starts funneling his own mana into his brother. He warns him this is probably going to sting a little. Yeah, just a little. Instantly, Benitez feels a massive shock run through his entire body. Davy plays it cool, blaming it on Benitez pulling an all-nighter. He casually suggests getting some more rest. Meanwhile, Davy's thinking it worked. The technique kickstarts the receiver's mana, forcing it into overdrive. It creates a chain reaction that boosts the flow throughout their entire body. And despite how simple it looks, this method is forbidden almost everywhere. Now that he thinks about it, Davy remembers one place where it wasn't banned. They apparently gave some seriously killer massages there, as the process wraps up. Davy mutters a single magical word. His brother is stunned. He asks what language that even was, but Davy just keeps on going. When he's finally done, his brother is flat on the floor, totally wiped out. The sudden surge of extra mana was just too much for his body to handle. Davy knows this won't directly help in the fight, but it'll speed up his brother's growth. Still, he can't just leave Benitez passed out on the floor. It might be safer, but it definitely doesn't look good. Benitez complains that if he were Winley, Davy would be carrying him. Davy completely denies it, but tells him to get to bed immediately. The alternative, another massage but way more intense this time. Benitez doesn't need to be told twice, he bolts straight for his room. Satisfied his brother is a bit safer, Davy finally calls it a night. And now back in the arena, the moment that magic hits, a shield flares to life. The one his brother gave him activates, completely protecting him. It violently repels Valentian's sword, stopping his attack dead in its tracks. The crowd immediately notices something is off with Valentian's blade. On top of that, they all see the powerful mana shield protecting Benitez. From the VIP box, Winley is on her feet, cheering for her brother's comeback. But when she looks over, Davy's seat is completely empty. Where'd he go? Back in the arena, even with the shield, Benitez is still injured. The mages end the fight and drag Valentian away. He's not just disqualified. The organizers declare his illegal actions could easily spark a war. They immediately send an official notice to the nation of Voltes. Valentian's servant begs them to reconsider, pleading for his prince to speak up. Instead, Valentian grabs the servant by the throat in a horrifying display. He explodes the poor guy's head right there in front of the entire crowd. And you and I just witnessed everyone in the stadium go into absolute shock. All right, get ready, because you're about to see a prince publicly execute his own servant. Everyone thought Valentian had completely lost his mind, and in a way, they weren't wrong. Ever since his run-in with Shario, Valentian just hadn't been the same. Seeing the pure madness erupt in the arena, some people started fleeing for their lives. Prince Valentian had gone berserk and was on the verge of a total breakdown. The organizers knew they had to act fast. But they also realized it wouldn't be easy to stop someone in that state. That's when our hero steps forward. He walks right over to his younger brother and tells him the match is over and that he'd done an amazing job. Benitez mentions that he created a mana barrier, and our hero cracks a proud smile. He knew a mana barrier was a high-level ability that protects its creator from harm. Now, Davy had placed a barrier on his brother as a backup, but the real reason Benitez was safe was because of his own growth. Even though he was only 14, it was something anyone would be proud of. Despite his immaturity, he clearly had a ton of potential. Davy totally expected his brother to cry and complain about the pain, but Benitez had really surprised him. Still, he told Benitez that he'd done enough, and now it was time to rest. Benitez was then carried out of the arena on a stretcher. Meanwhile, across the stadium, a huge problem was still exploding. Valencian was causing absolute chaos, a mess that, you guessed it, our hero has to fix. Now watch this. Some mages try to contain the Mad Prince, but even their magical attacks couldn't handle the situation. Valencian's mind and body were visibly changing. Not only that, but he was way stronger than the mages could deal with. So they tried to get people out while the magical barrier was still holding. But at that exact moment, our hero arrives in the arena, surprising the mages. They scream at Davy not to get any closer, warning him that their opponent was too powerful. Even Wendley, seeing him step into the arena, grew worried for him, especially since she didn't even see him move to get there. But despite all that, our hero was ready to deal with the situation. He noticed that Valencian had been infected with something, remarking that it looked like the enemy had completely taken over. He then starts plotting his next move. Valencian gets even more furious the second he sees Davy. As he charges toward our hero, the mages try to stop the prince, but it's no use. They couldn't handle the crazed opponent. Valencian now had a clear path straight to Davy. But then Winley suddenly appears, worried about her brother. I know what you're thinking, because our main character was just as shocked. This was definitely not part of his plan. The last thing he wanted was to involve his younger sister. But Winley wasn't the only one who showed up. Ileana arrived right after, shoving our protagonist away from the enemy. Davy definitely did not see this coming. Up until then, Ileana hadn't even been seen in the arena. It was like she just appeared out of nowhere. Not only that, she arrived with the clear intention of taking down the enemy. Valencian wasn't thinking straight anymore, just running on pure fighting instincts. But Ileana knew exactly what she was doing. She unleashes an attack called the Great Mountain Divider. And upon impact, she sends him flying. Trust me, it's wild. Davy was completely blown away. Stick with me, because this is the first time we're seeing Ilana truly in action. After landing a hit, Ilana figured the fight was over, but she was dead wrong. She stared in shock as Valencian was still standing. Even though her attack was seriously powerful, Valencian wasn't even badly hurt. Not only that, he looked even more ravenous than before, but before he could make a move, Ilana exploded into action, striking him from every possible angle, trying to put him down for good. She unleashed a relentless storm of attacks with her blade and her bare hands. Seeing the enemy just tanking her hits, Ilana didn't hold back a single ounce of energy. The crowd watching her fight, absolutely speechless. Just then, Ilana thought she'd finally done it. Valencian was down, looking completely knocked out. She ordered the guards to arrest him for his crimes. Winley quickly tried to pull Davy out of there, telling him to let the adults handle everything. But Davy was just admiring Ilana's power, realizing she was leagues above most other sword fighters. But then Ilana saw something no one else did and shouted out, calling Valencian a vampire. Now pay close attention, this is where the real monster shows up. Even in chains, Valencian started to move, and then he began to injure himself. From a distance, Davy watched his every move, and he could still see exactly what he was up to. Ilana rushed to stop him from whatever he was doing, but she wasn't fast enough. Because of that, Valencian unleashed a blood tide, and everyone close to the blast was the first to collapse. In the middle of the bloody mist, Davy rushed to protect his sister. Winley felt sick, but instead of worrying for herself, she was more concerned about Davy, trying to tell him she was fine. Davy just said everything would be okay. He got up from the ground and told her to rest, promising that when she woke up, this would all feel like a bad dream. The second he put his sister to sleep, Davy knew it was time to step in. Otherwise, things were about to get much worse with this dark mana in the air. And yeah, I know what you're thinking. He's the only one who understands the true danger. Not just that, he believed that when a user connects with their own mana, their powers literally start to develop their own personalities. But here's the thing, he has 3 different powers, and they all act differently. His necromantic mana, basically a psychopath, which makes it perfect for these situations. On the flip side, his regular mana acts like a tsundere. It seems like a pain to handle, but once you earn its trust, it follows your every command. And last, the most stubborn of them all, his holy power. This power has zero intention of listening to anyone and is also incredibly lazy. So unless there's a huge, world-ending commotion, his holy power just won't show up. Well, this was definitely commotion enough. Because of that, Davy received the Radiant Blessing, a 4th circle holy magic. Now that Winley was safe for the moment, he had time to think. He quickly figured out the enemy used a blood tide, a nasty power that steals life force from everything in the immediate area. The bad news. Davy didn't have enough juice to save every single person in the arena. But he was relieved that his friend Benedis had left earlier. And now that nobody was watching him, he could handle this mess without having to hide his true abilities. However, here's where things get complicated. To Davy's shock, Alana was not only awake but standing. A proud warrior like her wouldn't go down that easily, but this was the worst possible outcome. He had never imagined anyone else could possibly remain conscious inside the blood tide besides him. But seeing Alana de Farron on her feet, he realized she earned that divine sword. Still, all Davy could think was how beautiful Alana looked even when she was exhausted. He approaches the princess, and as he gently touches her shoulders, she immediately flinches. He tries to talk, asking if she's okay. But even in mortal danger, Alana tries to keep him away. The monster is still on the prowl, and all Davy wants to do is help. Noticing her resistance, he tells her that if she's well enough, she should just leave. But Alana grabs Davy's arm, demanding to know how he wasn't feeling sick. And just like that, he was cornered. He'd expected Alana to get suspicious eventually. But not this fast, and trust me, his next move is pure genius. He plays completely dumb, claiming he has no idea why the mist didn't affect him. Alana's expression says it all. She is not buying his terrible excuse. Though Davy thinks she should just be grateful he didn't die. Regardless, Alana takes command, ordering him to get out of the arena immediately. She says to leave the rest to her. This is a situation someone like Davy can't possibly handle, adding he just got lucky in their duel and that his luck has finally run out. Alana clearly sees Davy as just another useless prince, believing she's on a completely different level. She possesses real strength and knowledge, and knows the blood demons mentioned in the ancient texts are what we would call vampires. She tells Davy he must have heard of them, stressing that luck won't do him any good against an enemy like this. After all, anyone who can't sense or control mana is going to be ripped apart in a matter of seconds. Davy points out the enemy won't just let anyone leave the arena without a fight. Alana then declares she'll create an opening for his escape. Let's pause on that. Davy can feel the incredible confidence just radiating from her. But she seems far more emotional than during their duel, almost as if she's facing her arch-nemesis. A flashback then reveals a glimpse into Alana's past. As a child, she woke in the middle of the night and went to find her mother. But when she did, she found her mother sucking the blood from another person. Even at that young age, little Alana knew she was looking at a vampire. After that day, she never forgot what she saw. Back in the present, facing her enemy, she vows all vampires must be eliminated. For as long as she lives, that will be her one mission. But right as she's about to charge, Davy grabs her hair, stopping her cold. He apologizes, then tells her not to interfere in his business. Davy still has no idea why the princess is so obsessed with vampires. But he's done hiding his true power and gets ready to fight the enemy. Because contrary to what the princess thinks, Davy actually knows a whole lot about vampires. He learned about them during his training and probably knows more than she does. Plus, he has already fought and killed several vampires before. Trust me, for our main character, fighting yet another vampire is almost boring. As he dodges the enemy, he mutters that it seems to have gotten a lot dumber since their last fight. But Davy isn't here just to play defense. No, he's here to attack and end this for good. With that, he lands a solid punch right in the enemy's heart. This is an attack from the celestial demonic arts, a power known as demonic blood explosion. Once it hits, the enemy doesn't just feel the impact, he gets launched across the entire arena. And Alana, absolutely stunned. And this is the moment you and I get to see her entire worldview shatter. The guy she wrote off as weak just unleashed a ridiculous display of power. Watching him, the princess can't believe her eyes. Was that even humanly possible? Until this moment, she thought Davy was just an ordinary guy, someone who couldn't even sense mana. But she just saw him destroy a statue with her own two eyes while fighting a vampire. A feat even knights and mages would have trouble with. Even she, with her own sword, couldn't pull off a stunt like that, which makes her wonder if Davy really is just a prince who recently woke up from his coma. He then extends a hand toward Alana, but she actually flinches back in fear. Still, he keeps his hand out. Thinking the prince just wants to help her up, Alana decides to accept. However, the second her fingers are about to touch his, Davy asks to borrow her sword. She realizes he wasn't trying to be a gentleman at all, feeling a rush of embarrassment. Anyway, she tells him her sword broke the first time she tried to hit Valentian. But Davy says nope, not that one. He was talking about the other sword, the one she wears as a necklace. He says he needs a much sturdier weapon to take this guy down. So Davy tries to get the divine sword to help him. Now this sword isn't just a piece of metal, it's got a legendary backstory. The protagonist knew its creator, Surtur the celestial blacksmith, spent his life making countless weapons. In his hands, even broken blades were reborn, transformed into priceless treasures. Surtur's fame was known across the whole continent. In particular, his 12 infamous swords were scattered throughout the land, all of them considered national treasures. But among them, one was the blacksmith's absolute favorite, the sword known as Calorus, the White Guardian. And even though it was one of the 12, this one was on a completely different level. Calorus was forged for a close friend of the blacksmith, a man named Heresy, the literal god of the sword, who poured his own life force into the blade. This meant the sword had its own ego and could make its own conscious decisions, a fact that fascinated most people who learned about it. But our protagonist knew the sword's true nature because he had actually met Heresy. And knowing his personality, he knew this sword was not going to be easy to handle. Right on cue, Calorus demands to know who he thinks he is, just grabbing it. And you and I both know Davy was expecting this exact, prideful reaction. Seeing its tiny form, Davy sarcastically asks if Calorus can do anything more than just scream like a maniac. He then adds they'll get along much better if the sword just cooperates with him. At that exact moment, the princess runs up to the protagonist, asking for her sword back. Davy just says if Calorus kept refusing to fight, Ileana was the one who would suffer. On top of that, the main character was impressed that even without the sword's help, the princess managed to hold her ground in the fog, realizing she was stronger than he thought. But even with her strength, he knew this enemy was way out of her league. He needed her to understand her own limits before she did something reckless. Amidst all this, despite its guardian being in danger, the sword still refused to cooperate. Our hero then realized he'd have to do this the hard way. Now pay attention, because this is where he stops asking nicely. He forces the sword's power to manifest, revealing its magnificent true form. Seeing it, he remarks that the legendary Calderus is everything the rumors claimed. The sword, in shock, asks how he managed to do that. Davy's reply: "Just lend me your power for this fight and leave the rest to me." He then merges his own skills with the divine blade and begins to call down lightning from the heavens. With the storm raging, Davy calls out to his enemy, asking how much longer they plan on hiding. A rift tears open in front of him. It was time for the villain's grand entrance, but out flies a single bat. He couldn't help but feel let down, saying he expected more from a vampire. After all, he thought he was fighting a superior species. In response, the small bat transforms into a powerful female vampire. Davy smirks. He says he already knows her, Missade, one of the queen's loyal servants. Seeing him, the vampire says she suspected someone was backing the prince when her subordinates were defeated. But now she sees he did it all alone. "Okay, I know what you're thinking, and yes, the trash talk is about to begin." Davy sarcastically agrees he's amazing, but tells her to come down. He adds that if she stays up there for too long, she might end up showing off a little more than she originally intended to. As a vampire, Missade is absolutely furious at his provocative words, and that was exactly the reaction our main character was hoping for. Wasting no time, he lunges forward, attacking with his divine sword. The vampire warns that if he causes a huge disaster, the queen won't take any responsibility. Relations with the Voltes. Kingdom would be shattered, possibly even leading to a massive war. The hero realizes by revealing her true form, she's confident she can win. But he declares that her little plan isn't going to work. His sheer arrogance just fuels the vampire's rage even more. At that moment, she finally decides to attack him with everything she has. She unleashes her vampiric magic, which spreads out, destroying everything in its path. Even so, Davy dodges with ease, telling her not to get so worked up. Of course, his words only make things worse. Enraged, the vampire fires a volley of spikes at him. He leaps from the pillar he was on, only to realize the spikes were already there waiting for him, barely missing him. Davy twists and turns in midair, dodging as many as he can before finally landing on the ground. Like a master swordsman, he deflects the final few attacks with his blade. At this, the vampire has to admit he's better than she expected. And you and I know what comes next, the classic villain mistake. She declares that despite his strength, Davy is still just a human. Stick with me, because you're about to see the perfect way to beat a prideful vampire. After all the taunts, Davy just says it's a classic trait of vampire lords. They're just as irritating as they are powerful, not only that, of course. They're one of the strongest races, born with an insane amount of magic. The moment they awaken their power, they become leaders. If not for their one natural enemy, the great elves, they'd be completely unbeatable. A quick flashback. In Davy's past life, the sword god taught him an old trick he used. Always provoke a vampire before you strike. The tactic throws them off balance. It makes them way easier to handle. He also revealed that vampires are incredibly prideful, so the higher their rank, the easier you can shatter their ego. Back in the present, our hero smirks, thinking about the Farron Empire. They have so much faith in heresy. He wonders how they'd react if they knew her true, monstrous nature. Then it's back to the fight. He dodges a few of her attacks, then launches a counter with his blade. Now watch this, the vampire throws up a magic shield to defend herself. And it's not just any ordinary barrier. No, this is a blood shield. Calderas chimes in, saying he's likely facing a countess. Her rank isn't the highest, but she's a pure blood, and could easily give a lord a run for his money. Hearing this, our hero declares there's only one way out of this: defeat her now. But Calderas questions if he can actually pull it off. Davy just says yes. Then he turns it around, asking if the legendary sword itself is getting scared. Before he gets an answer, he's under attack again. Shirley says that people who pretend to be calm in these situations always die the same way. She boasts that the girl with the divine sword was strong, yet still ended up unconscious. And her plan: defeat the prince and leave him just intact enough so she can present his body as proof of her victory. She lunges again. But Davy has zero intention of making this easy for his enemy. Instead of standing still and taking the hit, he does something wild. I know what you're thinking, because he charges directly toward his opponent. The vampire calls it pure foolishness and tries to strike him down once more. But our hero doesn't just dodge the attack, he slips right behind her. He seizes the chance to mock his enemy, telling her she knows nothing. Especially when it comes to the art of the sword, the protagonist thinks to himself. True swordsmanship is an art form that goes way beyond just swinging a blade around. Calling on all his training, he unleashes a skill from Caloris himself. The enemy is sent into a panic, realizing there is no way she can dodge it. She's hit dead on, crashing to the ground like a meteor screaming through the atmosphere. After the smoke clears, the entire landscape has changed. So much so that even Davy is amazed by the power he just unleashed. Caldera's tried to say something about his past, but Davy immediately cuts him off. He says thousands of years have passed since the sword was made. He doesn't have time to hear its whole life story. Right now, more than talking, he wants to finish this fight for good. Our hero knew that even if he tried to explain, the sword would never believe he was its first master's disciple. Just then, Caldera's realizes the vampire has decided to run for it. A good idea to follow. Now, you and I both know this sword has seen a lot, but even it finds this tide of blood completely nauseating. The good news, the mist won't spread any further. Its source was shattered in that massive explosion. The bad news: bloodstones are still scattered all over the area. Our hero knows that anyone touched by this tide either dies or gets infected. And if these infected aren't put down, they'll just create more. For now, the mist is trapped in the arena. But if it's not contained completely, it'll spill out and cause mass panic. Just then, Caldera's tells our hero he's lucky he wasn't hit by something so corrosive.